Ladies and gents, this is ML's Like Teen Spirit. I've got Cara back for the third time. Cara, welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be back.
Good. Cara, this is a special topic. It could have been a 5-hour interview based on our prep call and where we took this to. So we had a meeting in the middle on this one, and this is about AI and how LLMs, there's a certain direction that the AI industry is taking it. So I'll start this and then we'll get into it. One of the big pieces of thinking is that we'll all use AI. It will be like turning on the tap and water comes out. So at some point, everyone has it. The big idea is that brands and companies where they have their own proprietary data for the AI to sit on top of, so the combination of that proprietary data and the knowledge in the language model will be some super synergy where it will all make everything better, sales goes up, results get better, so on and so forth. This is all kind of being pushed. And there's certain components to the AI sitting on top of proprietary data. You can take enterprise AI, where it's walled garden, blah 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 blah, and there's a product you can buy. And then there's this other end where like Google are like, ta-da! You can let our AI products look into your Google Drive, and it was going to read all your stuff and become better. And this was the point where we had liftoff on our prep conversation. So I wanted to start this call briefly around the idea of the AI sitting on top of your Google Drive being a bit of a fallacy, really. I'm not going to dominate this call on it, but I've always been so fascinated between the difference of like a regular AI and then how do you make it better? So it's almost entirely subjective. I invite anyone watching this to go off and research, well, how do academics look at, like, is it improving the AI? And of course, it's still subjective as to whether it's really better. And fine tuning. How does it make something better? How do you judge if it even is a better AI? But this call is not about that. This call is more like what type of what volume of data might you need to even make a difference in the first place. Again, I invite everyone to research it themselves. But hundreds and thousands of documents of fairly high quality documents is the kind of thing that you need for your AI to sit on top of to make any difference at all in its performance. So it's it's kind of being pitched as the AI will look at what you've got and immediately be better. I wanted to say it's not quite as simple as that. But of course, you've got this privacy perspective you're gonna bring to us. So let's walk through this case, Cara. I've got my AI, and despite my feelings on the matter, I've plugged my Google Drive into it at my company, and I'm excited. My customers will get a better experience. I will create better outputs in my job, and so on and so forth. But what risks have I just taken?
Yeah.
Talk us through it.
Okay.
Where do you start?
So to start off with, I will just be very upfront with this one. So I'm dyslexic. So I actually love all of these tools, these generative text tools, because suddenly my emails are free of spelling and I sound slightly more coherent in my responses for things. So to one perspective, I love the benefits that these tools can bring. On the other hand, it's really interesting because, again, it kind of comes to that old adage, quality in, quality out. And so if people haven't taken some time to look at the data that is in their company and classified it and checked the quality of it, then the question becomes, what is the value of the output? And it's like, we'll touch on the training section just separately around it, but it's like, yeah, it's suddenly going and scrolling through all of the data that you have access to as part of your account, whether you intended or not. So it's not just what you've created, it is everything you've got usually access to in the organization. So I know these tools have controls to put in place, but if you haven't got somebody there that's managing the controls in terms of access, information labeling, or your information labelings haven't been applied appropriately, you're kind of in this weird situation where if you're asking something, or if you've got somebody in your company that's just wanting to kind of like just see what's available, they have that ability. So these tools can surface documents up to you. And that's not to say that's not a helpful thing. It can be helpful, and I don't want that to minimize it, but it's just, if you want it to have really good outputs and to save you time and to have something that doesn't sound like something that's been generated just by AI from the web, you want it to have quality data it sits on. You want to check the data that it sits on. Me as a privacy person, I'm automatically drawn to the idea of, well, does it need to sit in systems or databases that contain HR data? Do you genuinely need that? And if you do need that, how do you limit who can view that data? Have you limited it just to the HR guys? Have you limited it just to the finance guys? Because you don't want something where somebody has classified like a corporate confidential document and labeled it in like incorrectly just because they dropped down or because the default settings are still on. So it's kind of that old thought of like, oof, does it really, what problem am I trying to solve by putting those tools into the system? And have we thought about what could go wrong about using those systems and using that tools? And do you have somebody in your company with the knowledge and expertise to manage it moving forward? Because again, this is kind of like new for everybody. It's thinking about like, is there an AI person in your company at the very least, or an e-discovery person? And if not, do you outsource it? So particularly for the smaller companies, is this going to be a new market for somebody to think about e-discovery for that company to go through and look at all of this sort of stuff? So it's just, I mean, and not even that, it's just, as again, taking that privacy lens. If you're suddenly using ChatGPT in your organization to generate opinions on your staff to help with performance discussions, first off, be mindful of the EU AI Act. But separately, if you're making a decision based off of how an AI tool has appeared in a meeting and made opinions on your staff members, and you're using that to make performance decisions, and suddenly that employee hits you with a data subject access request, you now have to show all of the opinions, the AI tool, and the questions that you ask the AI tool about that individual. And so you're kind of putting yourself at risk of having to justify why you couldn't come up with those performance decisions outside of an AI tool. And that in itself is I think that's going to be a really interesting space. So yeah, I think it's definitely going to keep me in the job for a while.
Well, look, let's roll back. Let's roll back to garbage in, garbage out. You didn't say it that way, so look, big compliment for your optimism. You're the only one who ever said quality in, quality out. It's never that way around. So that shows you as an optimist. I came into this topic slightly grumpy because big tech are saying the AI will sit on top of what you've got. It will get better. Not really qualifying what that means or substantiating it. But you used an expression earlier. We said, like, what types of data? And you talked about the classification of different data. Can you explain? I understood the rest, the access of data, because there's like folder permissions, file permissions, and these are all variable, and you might not quite know where you're up to. So there might have been a document that was shared in your team, I don't know what, or the Google one everyone would know is everyone with this link.
Exactly. Or everybody within this organization can see this document as a default or can edit. Yeah.
That's it. But what's the case with the classification? Like, how are you thinking of this in terms of the quality in, quality out, and so on and so forth?
So you've got this really, so for those that might be familiar with the terms in government, top secret data, that's a classification that's put on data. Large scale companies have information classifications, and it's usually 5 or 4 depending on what they are, and they all come with different terms. Everybody does it differently, but you generally have public, so something that can be seen externally by anyone. This is your external facing privacy policy, again staying within the privacy framework. You've probably got your general, which is internal ones, not to be shared external, but for everybody in your company. So that would be like your internal employee privacy notice, your other internal documents. Then you've probably got some do personal data. So they actually label files as personal data. This could be things related to payroll. This could be things related to employee grievances, whistleblowing. Again, depending on the nature of what's in the document. Then you've got your restricted, which is again probably limited to only a specific group of people. And then you've got your secret, which is usually encrypted. So there are tools that you can apply on your organization where you can push people to, in your Outlook, in your Word document, to label these documents and have it mandatory. So people have to think about what they want to classify the document as. And then you can make rules on that, on the underlying AI system to go, well, I only want it to ever have access to anything that is not secret or not restricted, so, or personal. And therefore, if all of your data has a classification, then amazing. You know exactly what the data is going to be. But again, that's not how the real world works. It's not like all of your legacy data. So if you make a rule that only has information classifications, and your user permissions, at least then you're mitigating the risk of bringing in all of that legacy data. And as with these automatic tools, if somebody needs to open up a document that hasn't been opened in 6 months, usually if they want to save it again, they can then have to put a classification on it. And then it brings it in. It's now something that can be surfaced or viewed within these AI tools. So it's just about thinking about what is a responsible way of bringing these tools into your system, which probably some people don't think about. They go, it's an amazing tool, let's bring it in, let's have it look at everything and let's have it do everything. But it's like, if you're bringing it in and it looks at like your marketing data, and your marketing data is 10 years old, and you want to do analytics and go, where are all my customers from? Well, if those customers moved, or if that data is no longer relevant, or there's been a shift in the company and your marketing strategy in the last 2 years, but you've trained it on the last 10 years of that data, how are those analytics actually going to be helpful? And then you move into the training side, where it's, does somebody have been trained to challenge the AI? So that's a really big thing of, like, going back to what you said, trash in, trash out. How do you have the ability to determine what's been put out as trash and avoid that confirmation bias of what's going to happen with that data? Because we know these AI systems can hallucinate, which is where they make up facts or statistics. So does somebody have that ability? Have they been trained to go, okay, just because this is what the AI has said doesn't mean it's right. How do I verify? And what happens if the system goes down from an operational perspective? Are you able to carry on your business as usual?
Cara, it's left me quite thoughtful. So the access parts and the classification.
Hmm.
I'm a company today, and either I take, Copilot is there if I'm Microsoft's having a relationship with OpenAI, and Copilot is the product. Google is saying, guess what? We're going to look in your Google Drive, and it's all going to be wonderful. These like access tools and classification tools, they are something else I would have to buy to apply this methodology to make sure, like, I think I'm trying to say, is it the case today that like an AI is just turned on and all of these good stuff of access, should it be, am I left with I'm posing the problem, am I left with having to review every document in my Google Drive? Is that kind of the position right now?
Possibly. Like, I don't pretend to have all the solutions. I think the thing is, when you look at turning on those tools and look in the settings, like, I know some of these resources, Microsoft have a load of videos and learnings that you can take. They have a lot of really technical web pages about setting up policies and procedures. I know Google has the same. I don't pretend to be an expert on the technical side and the e-discovery side. So my job is to point out the risks and point out what I think from a privacy perspective. We can do that. So yeah, there is some of those tools though that do the information classification, the access controls, they're also within the tools. So Microsoft is great, not trying to plug it, but if you've got access controls that are based on a Microsoft system and your information classifications that are in a Microsoft system, and then you turn on Copilot from Microsoft, all of that should transfer in. So that should be a really easy, user-friendly way. I'm assuming Google would probably be the same. I guess the thing is, where you're bringing in those third-party AI tools that are outside those frameworks, that's when you're also exposing yourself to risks of that, and looking at whether or not, like, your customers are okay with your data being used, their data being used rather, with those AI tools and sort of stuff. So yeah, it's definitely about being thoughtful about how you want to bring in that tool, how you want to turn it on. I think the phrase is indexing. So do you want it to index all your data and be able to pull it up at the top of your hat? Or do you just want to use it as a generative tool? Is that what is going to be the most helpful at this time, where you go through and you actually do a bit of an audit of your data? I mean, data hygiene is a great exercise to do anyway, and going through and purging and getting rid of any unnecessary data is an excellent thing to do. I appreciate who has the time to do that though. But yeah, it's going to be a journey for organizations.
You've walked into the trap. We've got time for one more question. So the part about, sort of people thinking mindfully about the data and the time they've got and all that sort of stuff. Let's pretend we're at work. So Cara, I want to use AI as soon as possible, and I don't care about time or mindfulness, but I was told to come and ask you. So you're presented with this case of someone with huge enthusiasm. What do you do next? So if you were, I'm sort of here like questioning Google and these things. So if someone comes to you when you're in your job, say, Cara, here's what I want to do. I want to use an LLM and I want it to look in all my information here. What is, like, I don't know, the first 5 things you would write on a piece of paper to begin to walk through the process of like enabling this? Or is it 55 things? Like, take us through it.
Yeah, first thing I do is take a deep breath. So first thing I would do is I would go, what's your use cases? Like, what do you like? That's great that you want to use it. Why do you want to use it? Because that's a really big thing for those that are with customers in the EU. You've got the EU AI Act, so you kind of got to be really mindful about what's your use cases, because there are prohibited use cases under the EU AI Act that straight up no, can't be done.
No.
So I would first want to make sure that we're not using it in any sort of way that would be a prohibited use case. Then it would be about going, well, is this a high risk? And is it a high risk? And again, the EU AI Act outlines high risk use cases. So again, you can look in the law firms and other firms put out a lot of guidance about this. So it's something you can do some discovery on. And then if it is a high risk one, documenting, okay, well, what can we do to mitigate that high risk? Because again, most organizations, I've not worked with one that's ever been able to accept a high risk, medium to low, depending on the value, possible. But high risk, you should be doing what you can to mitigate it and bring it down into that medium or low risk mindset. So that would be the first thing. And then, so first one, why are you using it? Is it a high risk or a medium risk use case? Then what is the data that you want it to sit on, and question whether or not you need all of that data. And if not, what can we do to scrape out or to stop it getting pulled into a system in the first case? So by doing those first 2 steps, you're kind of doing really well to mitigate that the risk. And then it's okay, you've got that. We'll look at the tool, but how are we going to teach people to use it appropriately? So looking back to a chat we had talking about like acceptable use, and thinking about, okay, well, how do we, particularly for LLMs, how do we stop it being used in the ways that are prohibited or high risk? And that a lot of that's people. It's the people side going, okay, how do we train them to write prompts that are appropriate? What controls internally, depending on the size of the organization, can we have to check if people are using it inappropriately? What happens? How do we discover if a document's been shared thousands of times and it shouldn't have been shared within a system? So you've got the people and the technology and the process. So training for the people on acceptable cases. You've got the technology itself. What controls can we put in place, and what's the process? Because if somebody wants to then now use it in a new way, how do you run it back through that cycle to make sure you're still being compliant throughout that life cycle? So that's kind of the high level, I would say, to have a think about.
Good. Cara, we've hit time. So look, thanks for all your insights on all these topics, and good luck with your business. Ladies and gents, this has been ML's Like Teen Spirit.